So the way that we're introduced to our protagonist is interesting.
You don't recognize me, do you?
What? No, Guards! Anybody?
We used to be neighbors.
So, you know how video games tend to put you through a little tutorial in the beginning, like, fight this weak monster, we'll walk you through it. Silent Hill Downpour has you murder a totally defenseless guy. I fucking love that. So, the guy in question is Patrick Napier, former next-door neighbor to Murphy and his family. Yeah, you can probably guess where this backstory is going, and it isn't pretty. Speaking of not pretty, his death scene is about the most brutal and gritty death I've ever seen in a game. There's nothing clean or efficient or otherwise video game-like about it. It takes forever for this poor schmuck to die. He crawls away, and he goes out curled up screaming in a corner covered in his own blood.
Why?
Damn.
You know exactly why.
Napier was in jail for molesting and murdering an 8-year-old boy. He apparently has no regret about it and is downright smug until he realizes who he's trapped with. And even though this game's message is basically anti-revenge, I have to say I rather enjoy getting to kill this guy now that I know what he did. I guess if I want to be consistent, now's a point where I have to talk about whether or not his model and animation are convincing. I'm gonna go with too convincing. Knowing what this guy looks like, combined with what he did... I apologize for the mental images. Here, use some of this. It'll be okay.
This is a violation of my rights. Who the hell do you think you are? When I talk to the warden,
No one's listening.
Help! Jesus, help me!
So, of course, child molesters tend to be sequestered for their own protection because they don't last long in prison.
Can you believe that shit? For their safety. Let me ask you this. What about Charlie's safety, huh?
This is where this guy comes into play.
So, what do you say, Cupcake? You gonna play ball?
I'll take care of it.
Oh my god, what a bastard. And not the cute, lovable kind like Vincent.
What's wrong? You don't trust me?
I honestly wish I could reach through the screen and throttle this guy. I guess that's a sign of a good villain, but we're talking Percy Wetmore from the Green Mile levels of scumbag here. But I better back up. George Sewell is a corrections officer at Rial State Prison, and a very corrupt one at that. He tends to make deals with the prisoners, and those deals rarely work out in their favor. In Murphy's case, he would arrange for Murphy to have some alone time with Napier, and in return, Murphy would owe him an undisclosed favor.
Of course you can. I know you're a man of your word, Murphy. You be a straight shooter with me, I'll be a straight shooter with you.
Yeah, that'll end well.
Remember, Cupcake, you owe me one.
We'll get back to Sewell later, but I will say that the worst part is that aside from one ending, he basically gets off scot-free. Fuck you, Sewell! Oh yeah, his character model and such. It's technically good and does a great job of making me want to see Murphy punch him in the face. He even just looks like the kind of person you want to hit.
Come on, rise and shine, Cupcake, you know the drill. Guess today's a big day, huh? To tell you the truth, I'm sort of sorry to see you go.
Getting back to Napier, it turned out that he was a sexual predator, and one day he met Murphy's son Charlie when he was on the way home from school. He lured him into his van, and Charlie was never seen alive again. This is why the theme of child death is so prevalent in this game, with J.P. Sater and the train accident, the Ribbon side quest which reveals that a mother apparently had her autistic daughter killed, and the memos you find in the monastery regarding a scared child who ended up dying on an operating table. And more obviously, also in the monastery, Murphy gets to watch creepy-looking boy get his neck snapped. But seriously, the way he loses it and starts calling out Charlie's name, it's really heartbreaking.
Oh, God! Charlie!
Charlie, I'm sorry. So sorry.
Up until this point, we had gotten little hints here and there that Murphy had a son who was murdered, but this is the point where the game finally just flat out goes, yep, this happened.
Is he out there? Charlie!
especially with the flashback that follows, which is even more heartbreaking.
Charlie!
So Charlie's death obviously had a huge impact on Murphy and his wife, Carol, and their relationship. Murphy blamed himself, and Carol also blamed Murphy. Funny, I thought Charlie had two parents. But anyway, in the final level of the game at Overlook Penitentiary, the prison where Murphy was being transferred to in the beginning of the game, we get to read a pretty scathing letter from Carol telling Murphy that everything is his fault and she doesn't ever want to hear from him again. Damn.
Carol, where did they get this?
But yeah, hence why the Screamers might represent Carol. So the part of the story relating to Charlie is generally wrapped up in the monastery. You get to fight a recurring monster referred to as the boogeyman. I'll talk more about him later, but he basically represents Napier to Murphy, and Charlie makes an appearance.
You killed him! You killed the boogeyman!
I think it's both sad and interesting that Murphy doesn't run up to Charlie and hug him or something, with how much he obviously loved his kid. Maybe he realizes that Charlie isn't there, or maybe he just feels at this point that he's not worthy of Charlie's love, so he doesn't dare to try to indulge at all. In any case, this line gets to me every time.
It's not your fault.
Funny thing about this story, maybe it's just me, but when the Charlie-centric part of it wrapped up and there was still a whole other level to explore, I thought there was going to be something else revealed about Charlie's death, like maybe Napier would turn out to be just a scapegoat and something else happened, like the scared kid in the monastery that we read memos about. I was wondering if maybe that was Charlie.
Wrong, wrong, absolutely brimming over with wrong ability.
Or maybe he was the monster in the wheelchair.
Wrong and getting wronger all the time.
Though, in retrospect, I should have thought about that undisclosed favor that Murphy owed Sewell and realized that they wouldn't just leave that thread hanging. And the end of the monastery was wrapped up a little too tightly to be a red herring. But however clueless I might have been about it, I like how the story caught me off guard with a final twist.
Pendleton. Get on the bus.
So there is a very prominent character that I've intentionally left out until now, Anne Cunningham. From the very beginning of the game, there's a certain officer who is a bit obsessed with Murphy. I mean, sure, it makes sense that she'd try to apprehend him, but she really goes to extreme lengths to try to do it, and nearly assassinates him at one point. At another, it appears that she does. And she makes it clear pretty early on that this isn't about doing her job. It's personal. Not that poor Murphy has any idea what it's about.
I don't know who you think I am, or what you think I've done.
Shut the hell up!
By the way, is it wrong that I find this scene kind of hot?
On your knees.
Oh yeah, Murphy's been a bad boy.
You think this is funny, don't you? Well, let's see how funny it is with a fucking bullet in your head.
Okay, that's taking it a bit far. I don't think Murphy knows the safety word. But what really set her off was finding a badge in Murphy's pocket. He has no idea whose it is or where it came from. It was already in the pocket of that clothing when he found it. But basically, she stalks him throughout the game.
Put the gun down, damn it.
Now, I'm finally getting to the story's ending, but first I wanted to mention that her character model and animation are spot on. You can tell that she and Murphy are the two main characters because clearly they have the most amount of time spent on them. She's really pretty, but not unrealistically so, and she's not overtly sexualized or anything. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Officer Leatherpants. And damn, she's got some intense eyes. Oh, and here's some early concept art where she reminds me of Jill Valentine.
Here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
Thanks. Maybe I'll need it.
Her name could be a reference to the character Walter Cunningham in To Kill a Mockingbird. He forms a mob to hang an innocent convict the day before his trial, but realizes that the man could be innocent and so he disbands the mob. Apparently, Downpour originally intended to be a co-op game, with Anne being the second player. Not sure how that could have worked. I'm imagining something more along the lines of Legacy of Kain Defiance, but I could be way off there. But they ended up scrapping it due to time constraints, and I'm kinda glad they did. Silent Hill doesn't need anything like that. The Born from a Wish scenario from Silent Hill 2 is one thing, where it's a short side game. We're talking about evenly dividing the story between two characters. I just don't see how they could have pulled that off.
What was that about?
Nothing.
Hey, Don't bullshit a bullshitter. Sewell's bad news, Murph. He doesn't do anyone favors. What are you in for with him?
It's nothing. Don't worry about it.
For your sake? I hope so.
So there's one final character that I haven't mentioned yet. There are several points in the game where Murphy seems to hear a voice in his head. The same voice every time of a wise older man who wanted to help Murphy at some point in his life.
You can't undo anything you've already done. But you can face up to it. Learn from yesterday, live for today, and hope for tomorrow.
Murphy, run!
Never let go of it. One day you'll see that it's all come together. You'll look back and laugh at what's past, and you'll ask yourself, how the hell did I get through all that?
During those times when Murphy is hearing his voice, his reflection will even show up in a mirror if there's one in the room.
Trust yourself, Murph. You know more than you think you do.
So far I've only caught that once, and it was during my third playthrough. You really have to know to look for it. That guy is Officer Frank Coleridge, one of the guards at Rial State Prison who we get to see in flashbacks. He helped Murphy get an early parole and seemed to think highly of him, and that he was somehow different from the other prisoners.
Yeah, you stole a police cruiser and led him on a 10-hour chase down the eastern seaboard. What makes a guy with no priors and a clean sight do something that stupid?
Seriously, you gotta love Frank, he's awesome. So on one side we have Sewell, who is staging murders and probably all other kinds of illegal shit, and so far getting away with it. On the other side we have Frank, who is aware of this and trying to get him busted. Meanwhile, Sewell has a standing deal with Murphy that Murphy will kill someone for Sewell, but he doesn't specify who. Oh, and he threatens to blackmail Murphy if he doesn't agree. Sewell is obviously the one wielding the power here, so it's not like Murphy has much of a choice but to comply. Yeah, this isn't gonna end well. So Sewell sets up a prison riot as a distraction, as he did when he set up Napier's murder. I guess it started like this. But I like to pretend it started like this.
From now on, marshmallow ass, you're my bitch. You're what? B-I-H, bitch.
In any case, Murphy went into the showers as he did the first time, only to find Frank Coleridge there. I think it takes a second to sink in. Murphy must be thinking, wait, what happened to the guy I was supposed to kill? And what's Frank doing here? Oh. Frank is even relieved that it's just Murphy and not someone dangerous.
Jeez, I'm glad it's just you. This thing is kicking off something fierce. I knew you'd be smart enough to steer clear of it.
Ouch.
This isn't what I agreed to.
What are you talking about? Agreed to what?
Tell him, Murph.
Oh great, here comes Sewell.
Why didn't you answer the radio?
Should've learned to keep your big fucking mouth shut, Frank.
I won't do it.
Yeah, I thought you might say that.
No! Murphy! Run!
It's very telling of Frank's character that his main concern, while lying on the ground half concussed, is for Murphy to be safe. Double ouch.
You son of a...
I'm not gonna tell you again.
Whether it was Murphy or Sewell who delivered that final blow depends on your actions throughout the game. Not sure how I feel about that, but I'll go more into that later. So, Frank was murdered. Or was he? Throughout the game, there's a monster in a wheelchair who shows up repeatedly as if stalking Murphy, not to mention that you see tracks everywhere, so it seems to be one step ahead of you. You also fight a giant version of it as the final boss, which you defeat by literally unplugging its life support. But after you kill it, it looks different.
That thing tried to kill me. It's not a man, it's a monster.
Also, we find out why Anne hates Murphy so much.
You know, he was a great man, my dad.
I'd never...
He didn't die right away, you know. Did you know that? And I had to watch this wonderful man shit and piss all over himself, day after day after day. And every time I looked at him, I saw a monster. I saw you.
Frank wasn't murdered. He was beaten within an inch of his life and left in a vegetative state for years. Damn, Silent Hill, what do you have against nice people anyway?
It wasn't you.
But Anne, who clearly has been on her own journey of discovery, realizes that Murphy is not to blame for what happened to Frank, and she forgives him.
I'm so sorry.
I forgive you.
Aww. There isn't enough hugging in this series. Silent Hill protagonists have earned it more than anyone. By the way, the badly modeled girl from the monastery also represents Anne, with how she regarded Murphy as a monster and probably reverted into a childlike state upon her father's death due to feelings of helplessness.
Wait! Come back!
Welcome home, Mr. Pendleton. Glory be to God.
Okay, there is one more monster I haven't talked about, and he is a biggie, meaning his size and his importance to the story. Throughout the game, you periodically run into a very large humanoid monster who is wielding a very large sledgehammer made out of a very large and very heavy cinder block. In the beginning, he represents Patrick Napier to Murphy. And I'm gonna say right now, if you're expecting me to call him a ripoff of Pyramid Head and complain about it, you're gonna be disappointed. I'm not gonna pretend there are any similarities. Again, it's a big humanoid monster who wields a big weapon, it kills people in front of you, and it symbolizes judgment in a way. I get it. But for one thing, he looks nothing like Pyramid Head, and he uses a blunt weapon instead of a sharp one. I mean, this is not a ripoff of Pyramid Head. This is a ripoff of Pyramid Head. See the difference? But where Pyramid Head symbolizes how James judges himself, the boogeyman symbolizes how Murphy judges Napier, and later how Anne judges Murphy. So no, he's not a ripoff. They're just using a similar theme, and they might even be intentionally invoking similar ideas because of that, but it's not as if they're reusing Pyramid Head again. I only have 2 complaints about the boogeyman, and they're kinda nitpicky. First of all, I feel like he's a little too humanoid. He literally looks like a guy in a gas mask and a raincoat. And like some of the other monsters, he does look cool, just maybe not as Silent Hill-like as I would like. But on the other hand, I do kind of understand why he does. He's meant to invoke certain people, Napier and Murphy, so in that context it does make sense that he'd look very humanoid. Incidentally, he did look less humanoid in earlier designs, but they ended up toning it down. Kind of interesting. I wish they at least kept the chains, I think those look cool. The gas mask rubs me the wrong way a little. Reminds me too much of the movies in Homecoming. I feel like gas masks are suddenly synonymous with Silent Hill now, and in the game's universe that just doesn't make sense. But I do like that he doesn't have any visible eyes. I kind of feel like Silent Hill monsters shouldn't have eyes. Usually they don't, and I think that's what bothers me about the more humanoid monsters in this game. I probably wouldn't notice as much if they didn't have eyes. The only other complaint, and like I said, it's nitpicky, is that he's called the damn boogeyman. I get how it ties in with the theme of child abduction and murder, but they already used that term in Homecoming as a name for Pyramid Head. It's just a little too derivative. And also, why do they spell it with 1 O? I always thought it was 2. Wouldn't this spell bogeyman? Which always makes me imagine this.
He's looking at you, kid.
But oh well, I do think he's a pretty cool monster and a good addition to the Silent Hill mythos.
You can't just forget. You alone decide your fate.
No fond farewell? You gonna miss us?
Not even a little.
Give it a couple of days at Wayside Max. I bet you'll start to miss this place after all. 'Cause we sure are gonna miss you.
So obviously I've talked about Murphy a lot already, with this being his story and all, but I wanted to go into some of his finer details that I hadn't had a chance to hit on before now. So in some ways, Murphy is a typical Silent Hill protagonist. Young man, cute, troubled, generally a good guy, though he's more rough around the edges than previous ones. This isn't a sweet, quiet, gentle soul like Henry Townsend. Murphy has a bit of a temper, and when he gets mad at you, he makes damn sure you know about it. Also, I feel like there's a little bit of Heather in him.
Thanks.
He's not as abrasive and snarky, but he's definitely a bit of a deadpan snarker.
Looks like somebody has specific taste in entertainment.
And I didn't realize how much I missed that. Also, I like how he talks to himself a lot.
Panel's busted. Bingo. Finally. Back outside.
Gives him a bit more personality.
Nice. A long time since I had real clothes.
One thing that sets him apart from the earlier protagonists is that he doesn't regard all the weirdness of Silent Hill with quiet confusion or any other kind of lack of reaction. He basically reacts in what I think is a more realistic way, where he lashes out a bit and that short temper of his comes through. Again, a little like Heather. It's like, this shit is not right and he is not going to put up with it, for all the good that does. Makes me want to plunk him into other Silent Hill games and see how that plays out.
To seal this town to the abyss, the mark of Samael.
What the hell are you talking about?
Could let you have it, but not for free.
Man, cut the bullshit.
I'm really thirsty.
Whatever.
Aren't you Maria?
I am. If you want me to be.
I came through hell and high water to get here because you called me. Now cut the bullshit, because I don't have time for this.
But despite his attitude and darker side, I think he's generally a decent guy, considering that he tries to help people who are in trouble, or thinks they are. Like I mentioned before, in the case of J.P. Sater, you can choose to either console him, not much consoling by the way, he just yells wait a second, or taunt him. The taunting seems a little out of character, but I can kind of see how he'd be able to sympathize with the parents of the victims of the train accident, and that he wouldn't have much sympathy left over for Sater, and that he could end up being maybe a little more crass than he would otherwise. Also early in the game, Anne is trying to cross a dangerous cliff to get to Murphy and she slips. You can choose whether to help her up or not. She falls either way, just as Sater jumps either way, but it still affects the ending.
Shit!
Now here, if you choose not to help her, I do feel that Murphy is out of character. I can understand him not wanting to go back to prison. It could even be said that letting her fall is the smarter choice.
I am not going back to prison.
Help me!
Sorry.
But his indifference about it is downright chilling.
I warned you about the cliff.
Speaking of Murphy's dark side, it's great how right in the beginning they turn things around. Your protagonist appears to be the cold-blooded murderer in that scene, who is killing a pathetic, helpless guy. They make it clear that there's revenge involved, so we can imagine that maybe the victim in this scene is getting what's coming to him, but boy. I'm actually going to take back something I said earlier. I said I enjoy killing Napier. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case next time I play this game. During the editing process, I've had to watch this scene over and over, and it's starting to get to me a little. It really is brutal. And it's foreshadowing in a way. Later, Murphy comes to the conclusion that he's no better than Napier, which is punctuated by his removing the boogeyman's mask, and the face revealed flickering back and forth between Murphy's and Napier's. And Murphy expresses his regret over killing him.
Doesn't matter. It didn't bring you back. Nothing can bring you back. I'm sorry.
But it's interesting to note that the scene with Napier is actually a dream sequence. Who knows if it really went this way exactly, if Murphy was really so cold and calculating throughout the entire thing. In one of the endings, Sewell reveals that Murphy couldn't even finish Napier off in the end, so Sewell had to do it.
I serve him to you like a fucking Christmas goose, and you can't even finish the job. No, I gotta go in there and finish the bastard off for you.
Like I said, interesting.
One little favor in return.
So I can't remember at what point during my first playthrough that I put 2 and 2 together and figured out that Murphy got himself put in jail for the sole purpose of getting a shot at the guy who murdered his son, but I thought that was pretty badass. Especially since he did it by hijacking a police car and leading them on a chase for 10 hours. I thought that was both insanely stupid and insanely awesome. But at what cost? I guess since his son was dead and his wife had divorced him, he figured he had nothing left to lose, but he sure threw away whatever slim chance of moving on he may have had. By the way, there's a book in the Centennial Building that talked about Murphy in an abstract way by comparing his self-destructive revenge scheme to a bee using its stinger and causing its own death. The barbed stinger of the honeybee pulls the lancet deep into the skin of the victim, injecting 1 milligram of apitoxin. When the bee attempts to flee the scene of the crime, it finds that a large part of its abdomen, guts, nerve, and muscle tissue are torn from its body and left behind. Eviscerated, the bee dies shortly after, paying the ultimate price for revenge. Which is freaking brilliant! Unfortunately, as soon as my brain made the connection that Murphy is a bee, I immediately imagined this.
I'm a king, baby, want you to be my queen.
But yeah, Murphy sure screwed up his life in an epic way. He's pretty nonchalant about it up until a certain point in the monastery where he breaks down and has this raw display of emotion, which seems to be a requirement for most Silent Hill protagonists.
When they cried out to the Lord in their trouble,
I screwed up,
He saved
but I didn't
them.
see any other
He
way.
brought them out of darkness.
You don't
to the
know what it
shadow
was
of
like
death,
to
and
know it
broke
was
their
my
bonds
fault he
apart.
was gone. Every
You who
time I
seek God,
shut
let
my
your heart
eyes,
revive.
I saw Charlie's
For the
face,
Lord
and
hears
all
the
I could
needy and
think
does not
was,
despise
that
those who
monster
are
is still
prisoners.
alive, but I'll never get to see
Amen.
my boy again.
Why are you doing this to me? What do you want?
But in short, Murphy is a wonderfully complex, multi-layered character with some contradictions to his personality. For any little gripes I might have about this game, it's like none of them really matter because it has Murphy, damn it! Oh, and another thing I should probably touch on? We've got another potty mouth on our hands.
You gotta be shitting me.
But in Murphy's defense, it generally sounds natural.
Oh, shit.
Like stuff a person would actually yell out when startled.
What the hell is this?
He doesn't sound like he's trying to be creative or cool about it like Alex does.
Fuck!
It seems like it just slips out. So I'm not gonna tease Murphy about it. Except that this one bit is kind of funny.
Shit!
Justified maybe, but still kind of funny. Sorry, Murphy. So here's something interesting that I think the developers did on purpose to pay homage to the earlier games. Since Silent Hill 2 dealt with murder, and Silent Hill 4 dealt with incarceration, and Downpour deals with both of those themes, Murphy kind of looks like a cross between James Sunderland and Henry Townsend. He really looks like Henry. His facial structure is a bit different, and Henry is cuter in my opinion, but he has almost the same hairstyle.
What the hell? What the hell? What the hell?
What the hell?
What the hell? What the hell?
And there's that too. He doesn't look a whole lot like James, but he has nearly the same color scheme, especially earlier in development when he was blonde. I kind of wish he'd stayed that way. We haven't had a blonde protagonist in a while, but oh well. Murphy's name is an allusion to fictional character Randall McMurphy, a convict who was transferred to a mental hospital from a prison work camp in Pendleton, Oregon, in the novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
What I did to Napier didn't solve anything. Charlie was still gone, and I was stuck in prison. Everything spiraled out of control. It was my fault. I just want my life back.
Revenge is a long, treacherous road, isn't it, Mr. Pendleton? Where do you suppose it ends?
Speaking of references to earlier games, there are a lot, but I'm gonna start with my favorite. Remember how I complained in my Silent Hill 4 episode about how that game is generally hated and the later games don't reference it when they easily could? Well, we finally got one, and it's a big one. There's a secret apartment you can access by a ladder, and it's Henry's apartment. No writing on the door, but most of the other fun details are there. Chains on the door, even that ubiquitous pair of shoes. Several songs from earlier in the series play from radios or by DJ Bobby Ricks.
So watch your back and keep it on track. It's always a perfect day with DJ Ricks, your on-air friend to the end.
What do you do now?
I'm going to Silent Hill.
What's in Silent Hill?
I don't know.
There are others, but those two are the ones I noticed the most. According to the Silent Hill Wiki, creator Devin Shatsky cited many influences and inspirations for the game, including One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Jacob's Ladder, Suspiria, The Walking Dead, The Shawshank Redemption, The Fugitive, and The Call of Cthulhu. I was not able to catch all of those, especially since I haven't seen all those movies or read all those books, but I suspect that the beginning of the surprise ending is a nod to Shawshank Redemption, and I couldn't help but notice that a recurring name on memos is Brian Handley, which sounds a lot like Byron Hadley, the prison guard captain at Shawshank. I noticed another memo was signed by Roberta Block, a fairly obvious reference to Robert Bloch, author of Psycho. Another memo quotes Detective Elliot Benson, which is another fairly obvious reference, this time to Detectives Elliot Stabler and Olivia Benson from Law & Order SVU. The second Silent Hill game to reference that, by the way, since one of the versions of Sybil in Shattered Memories resembled Olivia. I guess it's about time to wrap this up, but first I just wanted to mention a couple more things. So one more aspect of this game that feels like a bit of a throwback to Shattered Memories, seriously, I'm beginning to forget which game I'm supposed to be talking about here, is that your actions during the game affect what happened in the past and what sort of person Murphy is, somewhat. I'm not too big on that idea. The reason it worked in Shattered Memories was because Harry was the focus of that story, and wasn't a real person, and the entire thing took place within Cheryl's mind. You could say that she was in control of Harry's actions in a way. But Downpour takes place within the real world within the context of the game, and it's just kind of weird. Plus, in a way, I liked how your character had to deal with their past in earlier games. No matter how happy of an ending you got, Mary and Josh were still dead, Heather was still Alessa, etc. I was just kind of disappointed to learn that Murphy didn't kill Napier in one of the endings. And the execution ending just kind of makes me mad, although I do like this line.
I'll see you in hell. Cupcake.
But I prefer it being said while Murphy pulled a gun on him or something. There is a running theme regarding birds in this game. In the flashback where the police are pulling Charlie's body out of the lake and Murphy screams his name, he disturbs a big flock of crows in the trees. But up until that scene is revealed, it seems like Murphy can't go anywhere without disturbing a flock of crows, which I'm going to assume is meant to be reference to that flashback. Birds are usually symbolic of freedom, so that could be another purpose of including them. There's also a book in the Centennial Building talking about ancient priests predicting the future by studying birds.
Poor little guy.
Also, there's a side quest I feel I have to do every time I play Downpour. There are 5 bird cages scattered throughout the town, and as you free each bird, a piece of scene plays out, involving a sentimental little vision of Charlie. Aww.
Charlie.
Also, I feel like I should talk about the music because this is the first Silent Hill game to not have music composed by Akira Yamaoka. It is noticeable because Daniel Light's style is so different, but it's generally good and it works fine for this game. The title screen music is great, even if it reminds me of the dungeon music from Legend of Zelda. Seriously, is it just me? But anyway, the song that plays in the beginning is also great. And I even love that song that Korn did for the trailer. And the rest is unimposing. For the most part, it isn't the kind of soundtrack you rock out to or hum along with. It's mainly for ambiance. Sometimes it feels like a bit of a throwback to the soundtrack to the original Silent Hill game. But it works, and if you can get over the idea that it's different, it's a very effective horror game soundtrack. And there are a couple little mind screws that I'm just throwing in here because I didn't get to mention them earlier for some reason. There's a great one in the monastery where a playground has a tire swing, and when you look away and then look back, there's a body. Then it's a tire swing again. If you don't know to look for that, it can really throw you off guard. Also, during the loading screen, it does the usual thing where they throw gameplay hints up on the screen in text form. There are a few messages that are just there to mess with your head that pop up randomly, like, "We're all slowly dying," "Why are you lying?" and my favorite because it was after I had died and restarted the game, and I honestly thought it was criticizing my gameplay. Stop doing that! I just think that's pretty cool. Well, that's Silent Hill Downpour in a nutshell. It's not the best, it's not even my favorite of the post-Team Silent games. Shattered Memory still holds that title, but it's still a damn good game in its own right. There was clearly a lot of thought put into it, and it absolutely deserves the Silent Hill title, and I think Murphy is one of my favorite protagonists. If you haven't played it yet, give it a chance. The series isn't quite what it used to be, but it's far from dead. It's still Silent Hill, it still deserves attention. That's it for now. See you next time.
Nice shooting, son. What's your name?
Murphy.